this man, his name was Hamad bin Muhammad ibn Said al-Mujabi. He was popularly known as Tippu Tip. Tippu Tip. That was his known name. That is what he was known as. And yes, he was African. But not just any African. He was one of the most powerful slave traders in our history, in the history of Africa. He was a notorious Zanzibari trader, a plantation owner, and a slaver. Yes, he was an African. He was of Swahili and Omani Arab heritage. He was born in Zanzibar around 1832. He became one of the most powerful and feared slave traders in East and Central Africa. Yes, he was African, black, of African and Omani heritage. You know, we always call out the West for slavery and colonialism, and we should. We must, because for centuries, they carried millions of our people across the Atlantic in chains, the TAST. And these centuries of exploitation have left deep scars on our continent. These are the things we still see, the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade. We still see them in Africa today. And that being said, now let's also be honest. Enemies don't only come from the outside. Sometimes they come from within. Sometimes we have enemies in our own yard. You see, Tippu Tip was a Zanzibari, yet he led massive caravans into the Congo, capturing Africans and selling them into slavery. In fact, his nickname, Tippu Tip, came from the sound of his guns when raiding villages. Tip, 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 tip. That is how he got his nickname, Tippu Tip. You see that? Now, let me clear something up here, okay? Before you rush to my comment sections, before you start, yapping, let me clear this up, okay? Tippu Tip was not part of the TAST, the transatlantic slave trade. No, that trade had already been outlawed by the time he rose to power in the mid-1800s. Instead, he was a giant in the Trans-Sahara and Trans-Indian Ocean slave trades. The Africans he captured were taken to Zanzibar in modern-day Tanzania, then shipped across the Indian Ocean to Arabia, Persia, India, and even the Ottoman Empire. Those who were not shipped out of Africa were forced to work right there on his plantations in East Africa. So while the TST had slowed, Tippu Tip kept the chains alive through the Indian Ocean routes, devastating East and Central Africa even in the 19th century. He wasn't a rumor. He wasn't a myth. And if you doubt me, please go and read his own memoirs. He wrote them. Or you can also read books like Tippu Tip and the East Africa Slave Trade. The records are there in black and white. You can also read this one, Tippu Tip, the story of his career in Central Africa. The records are there. Tippu Tip even worked with King Leopold II of Belgium. As heinous as that man, Tippu Tip worked with him, and King Leopold made him governor of Stanley Falls. As heinous and barbaric as King Leopold II, Tippu Tip worked with him to exploit the Congo. So when I say Africa's wounds weren't just carved by the West, this is what I mean. Some chains were forged right here in Africa by men like Tippu Tip. And one more thing, let me make this really, really clear. Let me make it explicitly clear. I will only call out names with evidence. Tippu Tip's crimes are recorded in black and white. And please, if you know other Africans, bring me the facts, bring me the sources, and I will name them, I will expose them. Because like most of you already know, those who've been following me, you know I have always rejected that lazy phrase, Africans sold Africans, or black sold blacks. You know I have always rejected it. Why? Because it oversimplifies history and feeds colonial propaganda. Africa was not one country, and we didn't see ourselves as one people back then. What happened was this: different kingdoms, chiefs, and individuals made choices. Bad choices were made. Some resisted and some betrayed. So when I talk about Tippu Tip, I am not repeating that tired old banal narrative. No, I am pointing to a specific man with a recorded history. A man who chose profit over his people. So don't tell me, oh, you have been arguing that black. I have never said black didn't participate one way or the other. So I have always rejected, and I will still reject the same tired, lazy, oversimplified narrative that brothers sold brothers. Because the truth is this: the system was built by outsiders. Of course, it was built by outsiders. However, inside that system, some Africans played the role of collaborators. I have never denied that. And Tippu Tip was one of them. We must be bold enough to call them out. If you know one, give me evidence by name. Let's call them out. So why am I saying this today? What is the lesson I'm trying to bring here? What's the lesson? It's simple. Never ignore the enemy within. Because yesterday, it was Tippu Tip. Today, it may be another name. Whether it is Kemi Badenoch, Magate Wad, Frank Zanu, or Tony Anyanwu, different faces, same betrayer. But the lesson is eternal. Africa must protect herself. Name them, shame them, banish them from Africa's future. It doesn't matter. It's not about the color of the skin. It is the mindset. And let Africa rise, free from chains, both foreign and familiar, because we have so many Negropians in our midst